In the spring of 1804, the young United States stood at the edge of a vast unknown. President Thomas Jefferson had just purchased the Louisiana Territory from France, a massive stretch of land, doubling the size of the nation. But what lay beyond? Rivers? Mountains? A passage to the Pacific Ocean? Jefferson chose his capable young secretary, Captain Meriwether Lewis, to lead the expedition. Lewis, in turn, called on his trusted friend, Lieutenant William Clark. Together, they assembled the Corps of Discovery, 33 men, soldiers, hunters, and boatmen, ready to map the West, meet its peoples, and claim America's future. On May 14th, under a clear Missouri sky, the keelboat and two pirogues pushed away from the banks near St. Louis. The men cheered as they pulled upstream against the powerful Missouri River. Lewis and Clark stood at the bow, journals in hand, eyes fixed westward. Among them was York, Clark's enslaved manservant, a strong, resourceful man. The air hummed with mosquitoes and distant unknown birds. The first months tested them harshly as they hauled the heavy boats against the current. Sudden storms turned the river into a raging beast. One night, a violent squall nearly capsized their vessels. The men scrambled in darkness as lightning cracked overhead. Illness stalked them, with dysentery and boils. In August, Sergeant Charles Floyd died on a bluff overlooking the river, the only loss of the journey. They buried him with honors. By winter, they reached the Mandan villages and built Fort Mandan. There they met Toussaint Charbonneau and his young Shoshone wife, Sacagawea. Pregnant with her son Jean-Baptiste, whom they called Pomp, she became their guide and interpreter. In April 1805, they set out again. The plains stretched endlessly, black with vast herds of buffalo. Grizzly bears charged their camps, teaching the men respect for this wild land.
At the Great Falls of the Missouri, what they hoped was a simple portage became an 18-mile nightmare over rough terrain, prickly pear cacti piercing their feet. Sacagawea, still recovering from illness, carried her infant and helped where she could. Then came the mountains. Crossing the Continental Divide at Lemhi Pass, Lewis saw endless snow-capped peaks, but Sacagawea recognized the land and led them to her Shoshone people. In an emotional reunion, she found her brother, Chief Kamiawait. With horses from the Shoshone and guide Old Toby, they pushed through the Bitterroot Mountains. Early snow fell. Hunger forced them to eat their last horses. Clark wrote of being wet and freezing, yet they pressed on. Emerging from the mountains onto the Waipea Prairie, the Nez Perce helped them build canoes. They floated down the Clearwater, Snake, and mighty Columbia rivers through dense forests and roaring rapids. In November 1805, after battling fierce Pacific storms, they finally saw it, the ocean. Clark wrote, "Ocean in view. Oh, the joy." They built Fort Clatsop and endured a wet, miserable winter of constant rain. But they documented plants, animals, and maps. Even Sacagawea, York, and the captains joined a democratic vote on where to camp. In spring 1806, they turned homeward. On the return, Lewis and Clark briefly split routes.
We must decide. All in favor of the river bend, raise your hand.
I the river! I the river!
A tense encounter with the Blackfeet tested them, but they reunited and paddled triumphantly down the Missouri. On September 23, 1806, the Corps of Discovery reached St. Louis to cheering crowds. They had traveled nearly 8,000 miles. Lewis and Clark became national heroes. Sacagawea's courage lived on in legend. The expedition brought back invaluable knowledge that shaped America's westward destiny. It was more than exploration. It was a story of endurance, friendship across cultures, and the unbreakable human spirit facing the frontier.